So, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this lunch and learn. My name is Amy Penn. I am the president of the Dublin Business Chamber. We have Katie Glenie and Sarah Williams here to talk about sustainability. Just so you all know, this is being recorded and it's on Zoom. They can't see us, which is great, but they can hear us, and they will get, obviously, they'll be able to see the slideshow as well. If you've bought your lunch, please feel free to eat it. I will be in the back eating my sandwich, so don't make me feel like I'm eating by myself. We've left some time at the end for questions, but I'm sure Katie and Sarah will open it up as they need to as they go through. And yeah, if anything, any questions, just go for it. And I'll leave it up to you guys.
Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks, Amy.
No, my haramai. Lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. We have actually been flooded with RSVPs, so you are the lucky few. We had the same number of RSVPs as that couldn't come as are in the room, which was poor Jo, because I sent an email out that I didn't check with her, and suddenly she's like, wow, all these people want to come. But I guess the other flip side of that is it's really awesome to know that our community really wants to learn a bit more about this space, and I can see some quite learned, I'm looking at Brendan and a few others, there's some quite learned people in the room, so if we are off topic or saying the wrong thing, feel free to chime in with your own knowledge, because we're going to try and keep it relatively broad. You're all quite different businesses with different challenges, and the concept, I guess, is to try to get a bit of a base understanding of what is sustainability in business, and then we will use Jo as a practical example of how we can use a free sort of toolkit online to help you figure out where you should start in your sustainability journey. So some of you will have already started, and you can still use the tool to do more, and some of you are just right at the front of everything. Sarah's going to chip in along the way as well. I kind of drafted the original presentation, so poor Sarah will probably be like,
that's good.
Can I speak?
No.
So my first partai to the ropu is, what do you consider to be a sustainable business? So when you think about that, what's something that comes to mind?
Consider the environment and outcomes for everything you do.
Yeah, nice, yeah.
A business that's going to survive ups and downs.
Yeah, resilience.
Yeah.
Triple bottom line.
Triple bottom line, yeah. So that's normally people, planet, and profit. Yeah. Anyone else? I thought someone was going to be like, recycling. And then I'd be like, oh, do I have some joy for you? So the next two slides are a little bit complex, so apologies. I'll try and simplify it, but basically one version of sustainable business is this thing called the 6 capitals, which is what people use for something called integrated reporting. So a lot of people, when they think about a business model and they think about their business planning, they think about what money is it costing and what money are we creating at the other end. They might think about what raw materials do I need to put into my hopper here to produce some manufactured goods. But a lot of people aren't really thinking about what's the natural capital that I'm using to create whatever is coming out of my business, and what does it look like when it came in, what does it look like when it came out, which is the environment point. You've also got social capital, that's like community, the impact that you're having on your maybe the community you live in, but maybe it's the families of your workers, all of that sort of thing. So how did they look before you were there, and how do they look now? And human capital, intellectual capital, the kind of ideas you might be generating and creating within your business. So it's a way to get you to think beyond the sort of more traditional, like, how much did that thing cost me and how much money did I make out of it? The next one is, so who has heard of the donut economics model, Brendan? Yeah, yeah, okay. So this has become quite common language in sustainability now. The idea of the donut, it's an amazing woman called Kate Rose came up with this, is that you have in the world, there's an ecological ceiling. So that is how much of all these different things are actually available for us to use in our world. And there is a ceiling to that. That is not a never-ending pot. So there's not so air pollution, there's a point where we can put things into the air and then it becomes polluted and we can't breathe the air anymore. There's a point where we can take fresh water out and use it, and then there's a point where we're extracting more than the system can restore. Nitrogen, chemicals, ocean acidification. So there's all these sort of ceilings of things. And then the other aspect of the donut is the social foundation. So what sort of a society do we have that can create a subsistence for all of us? So are we in a society where everyone has access to energy, water, food, health, gender equality, peace and justice, political voice? If you don't have a political voice, you have no influence over who leads your country, over the decisions that are made on your behalf. So there's sort of the social floor, I guess, that you shouldn't go beyond. So the next slide is a little bit scary, but this is so it's about living within the boundaries of the planet. This is what's currently happening. All of these red bits are where we're overshooting. And this isn't like a little bit of overshoot. There's a date that happens every year, which is the date that we have used all of the Earth's resources up for the year. So back in the 70s, we took the whole year to use what we needed. Does anybody have an idea of when that date might occur in this year?
March.
Mid-May.
So this year, I mean, I'm pleased you're very negative because this year, Earth Overshoot Day occurred on July 28th. So, and you can look this up and track it since the 70s, how it's gone from like December 31, December 20, and then it started, and then it's rapidly speeding up now. So that's just to give you a sense of that idea of we have a planetary system that can sustain us. And when we start to dip into that system beyond what can sustain us, there are obviously ramifications for that. So the next part I've got for you is, why do you think your business should care or focus on sustainability, aside from it being the right thing to do from a values perspective?
Can I just say one? I actually think that sustainable businesses are less risk for just even operating. So if I compare what I do, which is basically recycling, reusing bikes, buying them, getting them for next to nothing, and then generating some income, reinvest that back, versus a bike shop selling electric bikes or a car company selling electric cars. These have a massive financial risk based with them anyway. If you buy all this stock and you don't sell it, you bust.
So I guess what you're saying is building resilience into your business for the future is something that is a good reason to do it.
I just think personally, like, the way trends have gone, it's a disposable world, and everyone likes lovely shiny things that are powered by batteries. If you look at all the boring things that's going on, people that interesting, pushing a bike around, or like Michael can turn with Minoki, like mucking around with the worms in the mud. They're amazing businesses that can actually generate a lot of benefit for society and a lot of profit. But no one's really pushing them unless you get like unusual people that come out of the woodwork or the work with Michael's case to do these things.
There's a really good book about nurturing ideas, and I think that what we're seeing now is people with crazy wacky ideas. Don't be afraid of crazy wacky ideas. Like, we need new thinking, we need different models, and we need new structures. Anybody else on why you think maybe your business should focus on sustainability?
I'm a florist, so I mean, if we don't look after the environment, how are we going to grow flowers? And it's very no-brainer. But I mean, it's surprising how many florist businesses out there are actually only, like we saw with the Queen's funeral, they're only considered with that winter sale. They don't actually think past the winter sale.
Some of them were picked from her garden, I had heard, though.
Which is amazing. Her actual flowers in her coffin were incredible, but when you look at
all those
the
people
amount
putting them in
of
front of
and probably the amount of imported flowers,
just hasn't even crossed people's minds.
No, and the florists there who were actually selling these flowers to people, knowing that they're going to put them on. Why do they need to put the plastic wrap around them?
They don't. They do not. That must have made you irate.
every time there's a significant event like this where people are buying flowers, like even whakaari, you know, you go to the beach afterwards and there's plastic wrapped flowers on the beach. Why do you need the plastic? Because essentially, what's the difference between, I mean, that's intentional
waste.
rubbish.
Yes.
So
that is a great example of looking at what you can intentionally remove from your process that is not required for the end outcome. Like Kristen, obviously you wrap in paper and you think about what you put the bow in and you don't use the floral foam because you're thinking not just I've given you that, which is a lot of businesses are like, oh, I sold that to you, see you, oh, it broke in a year, oh, sorry. Next, do you want this one? Joe, you were going to say something. So.
Our business, I mean, the core message for our business is about sustainability, but from a physical presence of the business, if we can be sustainable, doesn't that encourage other businesses to be sustainable?
Absolutely.
And if we all do it, then it has impact. It's just one person, and then it starts to change. Everybody gets on board.
Yeah, and that's something that I've learned because it can get very overwhelming in this space, and if you're really into it, it can feel a bit like, well, I'm doing my bit, but look at all the Queen's wrappers and that's not very good. But I have found the power of that ripple effect is huge. So what you're doing in your industry is rippling out on others in the industry, and it is rippling out on customers who get your flowers and get the other flowers. And they're like, why does that one come with all that stuff? These flowers work fine. Yeah. So this is far too busy, this slide, but basically what I was trying to say with it is there are macro trends emerging right across the world that will impact on your business, whether you like it or not. There's things happening with demographic change. There's huge population growth in Asia, which is changing the sort of geopolitical space. There's a lot more young people in the world in terms of consumer influence, but in particular regions of the world. You've obviously got those climate change impacts coming in. You've got some of these sort of economic shocks that are happening, like the COVID economic shock. There's different, the changes in, we're calling it post-materialism. So we're coming, hopefully, out of the place where we do just buy a lot of things and throw a lot of things away because that's not working. There's this sort of polarization, radicalism thing. So you're seeing that happening with, Russia and Trump and these sorts of sort of diverging rather than converging views. There's automation as a general statement. Automation is impacting lots and lots of parts of the world, removing sort of a person from a process. So a lot of these things are changing our world and they will change your business environment. So if you're an exporter, that changes what you can export. If you're selling into the local market, there are things that people will no longer accept from you as a business. This is just about what is happening in terms of weather effects in New Zealand. Does anyone know much about this around climate change? Any ideas on what's happening in New Zealand? Yeah.
Definitely more rain in the winter.
Yeah, intense heavy rain this morning.
Come in. Any ideas on how it's changing?
More extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. Wet snow, no snow. Yeah, hot, like more, what do they call that? More intense weather days, particularly with the heat. You right there, John? You see that, all right? What's that?
The arable areas are changing.
Yeah, so what?
Plains and parts of
Yeah.
which have been ideal for growing grains, are getting
Too
too hot and
dry.
dry.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're clearly seeing the effects of climate change right now. You're getting less cold days, you're getting a warming ocean, which is affecting the weather system, more heat waves, this is specific to New Zealand, increased extreme rainfall, so those flooding events, we're going to see more and more of them. The big one that a lot of councils are dealing with now is this coastal inundation issue. So with sea level rise, there's a direct impact on coastal dunes, sand, habitats for bird life, housing. There's a lot of marae that are on the coast that are affected by that. more animal pests, more weeds, and the pests used to be like, oh, I can't go up there, it's a bit cold. So all the things that lived up there were safe. Now they're like, oh, I can get right up there, there's no snow anymore. So, and then we're getting new diseases and pathogens. So COVID's an example of the types of diseases and pathogens that become easier. It's easier for those things to occur in a warmer climate, basically.
One of the things I noticed this summer, just gone, there's extreme temperature differences. So we actually had nearly 29 degrees difference during the day. And that's massive, especially for my industry. That materials move so much with those, and so that makes a big difference. And so we have to be thinking about that side of things as well. There's a, you know, suddenly, if you had a 5 or 6 degree difference, your materials don't move that much. When you have that, it's massive.
Yeah, and swelling, and yeah, I haven't saw that. Right, so this, some of you will be familiar with this. This is New Zealand's emissions profile, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm going to give you a comparison in the next slide. So basically, Brendan, look away. Basically, agriculture is about 50% of our emissions in New Zealand, and 23% of those are coming directly from dairy. So sheep, beef, other also create emissions, and then this is kind of showing you within that sector of agriculture where the emissions come from. So it's methane primarily, which is why dairy cattle have quite a high percentage there, and things like, sorry, this is breaking you down. So sheep, it's mostly methane, beef, it's mostly methane. So,
And those are different versions of carbon in our atmosphere from a chemical point, like from a chemistry point of view.
yes, good point, because methane chews up into the atmosphere real quick. So it's a bad one.
20% more, yeah.
Yeah, 20,
Is it 20?
22 something,
22%
yeah,
more,
around
yeah.
there. So I thought I'd do a bit of a pop quiz. So that's New Zealand's emissions profile. What do you think the Taupo, not the Taupo district, but the Taupo district council? So this is the
As a
reason I'm doing
business.
this is to think of it from a business perspective. So if you think of them as a business with certain things that they operate, what do you think this might be? So they're not farming, so it's not going to be a farming number in there.
Green waste.
What was that? Okay, transport. Yeah, and what was your one?
Oh, vehicles.
Vehicles. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
What's the waste to landfill if they're collecting rubbish?
Joe, look at you. You're on it. So, so the reason it's not transport isn't because transport isn't a big emission for our district. It is, but the council isn't in control of transport. They're in control of the services that are supplied and some of the roads and that, but their transport emissions would just relate to their fleet, not to everybody else. Well, I'm not sure if buses fit in regional council or
Regional council.
yeah, regional. I mean, it's semantics really, but yeah. So even if they had the buses, it wouldn't be their biggest portion. So that's why it gets, I guess, a little bit granular around you thinking about what your business does, what you're in control of, what you have impact on, and that's where you can make your definite changes. So clearly council is going to start thinking about what they're doing with waste to landfill, because the vast majority of that number is coming out of food waste. So we don't have a compost collection, driveway collection here, and we want to have one, and the council is working on having one. But that number is primarily coming from all of our food waste that we're not composting at home, that we're not worm binning at home, that our hospo industry as well as residential is chucking in a big hole. And just to use Shannon's example from her waste talk, people don't realise that when you put something in a landfill, it doesn't compost. It doesn't matter what it is. They have pulled out, I think your example was they pulled out a newspaper from 1972 and you could read every single line on it, because there's no air, there's no light, There's nothing to create any form of life in those things. They're capped, they're closed off. So when you put it out on the street and it goes down the road and you don't see it again, it's literally sitting as you put it on the street in that big hole. So that's why waste is a problem for us, and we've got a landfill that's running out of space. So the construction waste, I'm sorry, I'm looking at you like it's your fault. Your construction waste. I look at Ian, construction waste. Yeah. So the interesting thing about construction waste is that it's not producing the methane, but it is taking the space. So it's taking a lot of space, and there's a lot of construction materials that are imminently recyclable. We just need to figure out a local solution for that, because we don't have good services available for that at the moment. So that's a sort of a whole chain approach that we need to figure out, because it's where do you drop it off, who collects it, who can do it afterwards. And I know Ian's been trying to get that away with the jib board, and it's been really hard. So it's not that it's impossible to do, but it is a whole system approach. So anyway,
what's the resources?
So electricity is to do with street lights, the infrastructure around pumping water and waste, and buildings as well. So the council buildings, event centre and things like that. Chip in if I've missed anything.
Oh, so the resource consent's up for grab, up for renewal in 5 years' time as well for the landfill.
Yeah.
As well. So there are other issues around
Consent.
Tūwharetara and cultural issues, and
Yeah.
that's why the council in their wisdom didn't decide to go for the gas fired flume up there, because the time and whether
That's a bugger. Yeah. So what is probably going to happen is we're going to be shipping our waste to someone else's rohi, and to
the
me,
transport costs will go up.
yeah, it's going to be expensive. And I also think, who are we to say you can take all of the crap that we don't want anymore? You know, like I don't think that's the way we should do it. So anyway, waste to landfill is something to consider. So why do you think sustainability might be good for your business? What might be a benefit that could come out of thinking about sustainability?
Marketability.
Yeah. So you mean like reputation sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Customers.
More customers?
Dealing with sustainable businesses.
Yes, and we're seeing that statistically that is actually happening now. We used to try and convince people it was happening, but it is actually happening now. Yeah.
Feel good for that business and staff.
Yes, a sense of connection and purpose. Yeah, excellent.
It's actually lower cost to run your business sustainable than it is.
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, cost savings, definitely. Yeah.
Impact on the community.
Yes, positive often. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, nice. So I think you guys pretty much got everything except what was that?
We've got the converter.
Yeah, we have got the converter in the room. I guess the other thing to note is David's point earlier around removing risk, and also the legislation is changing. So there are soon things that will no longer be, you just won't be allowed to do them, whether you want to do them or not. You legally won't be able to. We're seeing a lot of competitive advantage in businesses that move early, because they create quite a strong sense of leadership. They get good customer loyalty. People are like, oh, you guys made the effort to get started. So that's something that seems to come through as well.
Just talking about legislation, obviously with the government with the emissions rating, they're purchasing carbon. It's costing, like this year, about $1.8 million to the ratepayer. It's probably going to go up to 2.5 next year. So reducing carbon footprint is going to be less stress on. Will help the ratepayers, alleviate ratepayers in the district as well as in business, because they pay double as well. Ratepayers, business people paying double rates.
So you're paying for your landfill emissions,
Yes,
eh?
yeah.
So that biggest emissions bit means you're in the carbon scheme that you have to pay
I've
for.
got no
it.
choice. There were some people challenged that there's no choice.
No, you don't get to choose if you're in or out. It's basically there's a cap, and if you're above it, you have to pay. And then that carbon price used to sit very low, but now it's just going up at a rate of knots, because it's clear where we're heading. So anyway, the next thing we're going to do is introduce Joe. And Sarah, do you want to go through this bit? I can sit over there.
Yep. Okay, so we've got,
Joe's like,
as I said, we've got some wonderful people in the room that are already well and truly working in this space. But there's actually, for those who haven't started, there's a tool, or maybe you've started and you'd like to do more. There's a tool online that was developed by ECA, the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment, SBN, Sustainable Business Network, a bunch of people, Meridian were involved. They created this free tool for the small medium enterprise in New Zealand, because our business landscape is small medium enterprises, about 97% of businesses in New Zealand. So it's a large chunk of people. And so you might feel a little bit overwhelmed because you're a small player in a big sea. But if we can get, 97% of our businesses, and if the small medium enterprise moves in this direction, then we could collectively have quite an amazing impact. Yeah. So I was just going to quickly show you the tool, and I was going to ask Joe to answer the questions. So the first part of the tool is you answer a 60-second questionnaire, and what it does, it helps you understand the key areas that you should focus on as far as having an impact, having a positive impact. So you don't need to feel massively overwhelmed at the beginning. So this tool's online. We can send you the link. You'll find it pretty easy if you search Climate Action Toolbox. So you answer a bunch of questions. So from your point of view, Joe, your business activity mostly takes place where? And there's a few options. What would you have answered if you remember? In an office, at home,
retail or hospitality venue.
Lovely.
Don't know me, I'm Joy from the
Oh, we didn't do that Oh, thanks, Joe. That's so rude of us. Joe's awesome. Catch up with her after.
The next question is, our people travel infrequently, don't travel for work frequently?
Don't travel for work.
Your core operations include or don't require the transport of goods, materials or waste or from our business? That's okay. Our business something involved in the design and manufacture of products, is or isn't? Okay. Take me to my client action. So that's the scope of the first lot of questions to help you get a feel for where you should be targeting your efforts.
Right.
I'm a bad handler. So there's a whole lot of options that you could be focusing on. Have you started exploring any of these, Joe?
So we've done quite a lot. My husband and I bought the business 4 years ago. So when we took over the previous owners had been on a big sustainability journey already. They were very passionate about it at the time. So we've tried to continue with that journey. So we implemented a number of things when we first bought the business. In that first 18 months, we had a bit of money to invest into it. And COVID came along and changed things a wee bit. So when I did this, I chose to keep things on the action plan to see what we kind of had done.
Yeah.
But also we're now another 2 years on, 2.5 years on. Can we look further at it?
Yes.
So I actually probably put more on the action plan than we maybe needed to.
Yeah.
But it was a good time to just review everything across the board.
Brilliant.
So I clicked on each and every one of those blue highlighted things. Action plan or markers not relevant.
And which ones did you end up adding to plan? Do you have that?
Yes, I do have that. So we looked at company cars.
Okay, was that on?
So that's
That's not on this one.
Goods, was it?
No, this is all more about refrigeration and.
Maybe I'll change my scenario and say, I'll say, if I answer don't travel for work.
I think it's more that it's a number 2. It's just a number 2.
Is it?
Because wasn't it? Oh, was it your company cars or your couriers?
Company cars.
Yeah. Do you use them a lot at work?
Just to get to and from work.
Yeah, so that I wouldn't prioritize that in that scenario. If you were cars, I prioritize if you're using them a lot for work, you're traveling everywhere. The transport side for you is more the freight coming in and out to your site from couriers.
Yeah.
Did you say isn't involved in the design manufacturing project? Okay, yeah. Oh,
Because
I
there's
just changed it
so
anyway.
that moving goods one is
Yeah.
where you would get the,
Moving
It's
goods.
about freight.
Yeah, so we've got transporting materials to your business, cutting emissions for deliveries to our business. So we have 92 different suppliers across
Wow.
product lines. So how can we order in bulk? How do we ensure we have best deliveries? Where are they coming from? Yeah, so that's a big area for us.
do you want to scroll down and see if, I think that gives you, if you click on that again, what you had up before, I think it gives you some examples of
Okay,
actions
studies.
that you can
Oh,
take.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So step by step,
Yeah.
identify the issues, work on high impact areas, collaborate with suppliers. The cool thing is this involve your team as well. I've seen this is because it is hard to get your head around prioritizing this at the moment, given we're just coming out of the COVID situation and so many things have changed. But the opportunity to involve your team or attract new staff members because of the way you're working or the work that you're trying to do is quite impactful. And I wonder if you've experienced that with your team out there.
Yeah, the team are really passionate about what we stand for, and it's just part of what we do. And I think each change that we incorporate and is really actively taken on board by the whole team.
Yeah.
And the team are all encouraged to make suggestions themselves. And
Yeah, and I think,
it has to be a collective effort.
yeah. And the other good thing about doing a tool like this is that often you'll have those people in your business that kind of want to do something. And this can direct their effort, because often those people end up doing the recycling because they're like, well, in the absence of anything else, I'm like, well, I'll do that. And actually it might be much more valuable for them to do something else. Yeah.
We have some team members who are champions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other thing I'd say is if you are like, so Jo's already on a journey and she's ticked off quite a few of these. If you're at the start, don't put all like heaps on your list because you'll get a bit like, whoa, unless you've got a big team and you can delegate. What was that?
Don't print it out.
Yeah.
Good call.
Don't print it out. Because if you go back to that, I'll just keep doing that. I was going to say there's the one in the list that says quick one
Oh yeah, but let's find a quick one.
and impact. So see there, you've got
Sorry.
the things. Sorry, it's my mouse, isn't it? That one is quick one, but the impact is three
Oh, yeah.
things.
3 scores.
Whereas switch to electric vans and trucks is harder, but has a bigger impact. So that's also a way for you to think about how you want to prioritize it. Do you want to kind of have a few of the quick ones and a few of the ones that are a bit of a longer burn? Yeah.
Okay, yes. Because we're doing this, well, first off, we're doing this process at the moment, even though Medark is really Kaitiaki since we established the business. We're going through this process now. It's extremely useful because one of the things about working in this space is there's so much stuff going on. You just feel like you're just being overwhelmed by ideas or opportunities. So having some things to focus on. I'd challenge though that even though if you're a small business, you might be an independent owner of a business, that you still don't take a long-term strategic view of this. Like this is focused on climate, which is really awesome. That's one of the big things you need to tackle. But from a sustainability or a Kaitiaki perspective, there's a lot more other stuff outside of climate. People, biodiversity, things like that. So certainly leap in and do these things too. But if you can find time to step back and think about what your business is going to, for example, things are going to be very different in 2030. So the operating environment of your business in 2030 is going to be very different. If you can put yourself in those shoes and say what your business is going to look, what's going to operate in 2030, think about some of those other issues coming on. There could be some things in there which are really relevant to your business that are more than recycling and shifting to an EV. So I just challenge people to step back and take the big long-term strategic view if you can.
Yeah, and like that kind of complex spaghetti model I had where you think about the capitals in and out, that's sort of to that point is that like if your business is using a lot of water, you need to be thinking about that right now because we will be getting water metering. There will be heavy restrictions during the summer now because of these hot periods. Like that if that's an essential for your business, you need to be thinking about water. And the capital thing, or human capital, I think is quite interesting for us at the moment, because we're all struggling with getting good people into our business and keeping them, which is, I think, an interesting observation, that when we don't just have this tap that we can turn on from overseas, what are we actually providing for our local people? And sometimes you sort of lift up the cover and you think, actually, we're not doing an awesome job here. So so to Brendan's point, looking a bit broadly is quite useful in that respect.
We did a bit of that when we set up papers, right, of making a conscious decision 3 years ago to not put gas into a Costco kitchen,
which is
cost us a fortune in appliances for electric, because to get enough heat out of them, like a deep fryer, costs a hell of a lot more than a gas one.
but the emissions are way less. We're not having a loud conversation about gas yet, but it is, it's on the table. They're actually, at one point they were looking at regulating gas out of hospo.
And it will disappear at some point. Nobody knows where that point is.
Because I've got gas at home, and because I bought our house before I knew all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's so good to cook on. It's really easy. And now I'm all like, I just put it on really low. Put the lid on.
Especially the same with water usage in your own home as well, because there's a cost of that. You use a lot of power for wastewater with water as well. So as Howard's suggesting, it's a bigger picture there as well. The cost, could make it more efficient. Even cleaning your teeth, things like that, using water. My daughter used to say, turn the tap off. Then when you're cleaning your teeth, type of thing. Education as well, big deal.
Yeah, it's good to get the kids telling you what to do. I reckon that's the way forward.
Another key as well is actually looking at where your industry is. Every industry is different, but by 2030, I mean, my industry, we've got a massive amount of regulations that are going to change by 2030 to actually meet carbon emissions and all those other bits and pieces. And so I'm looking at how we would have to design houses then to make sure that we're designing them that way now. So and it doesn't matter whatever business you're in, you need to think about where are you going to be and what are the changes that are going to actually happen. Every industry knows what's going to actually happen. Just find out your regulators and speak to them, and then you can work from that back and say, hey, look, we're going to implement that now. And so, like you said, you can be the leading people.
And there's real benefit to be a leader. Like, some people are like, oh, it's just so you can be a show pony. It's not. It's so you can learn and figure it out. So when it comes in, you've got it humming, and you get the marketing benefit of being leading beyond what anybody else was doing. You also, which Ian's doing, is you get the ability to influence what 2030 is going to look like, because you've got your pilot program. You can be like, well, this is what actually happens when you do that. Oh, okay, well, we'll tweak this legislation, or we'll change it a bit to adapt for something that we hadn't thought of, or
Okay, well, where else do we need to go? So you get the gist. The first part's pretty easy. You can get some high level understanding of where you should target your efforts and focus. You can go into a whole lot more detail, and you can do emissions calculations as well if you want to go into that space. You don't have to, like, if you're not going to try and offset exactly and go for carbon zero, things like that, then the calculation piece isn't necessary. But if you really want to understand, it's actually not as hard as what you might think as well to use calculators.
And don't I totally get what you're saying, Brendan, because it's important to think more broadly in this space, but don't, like, if the only action you take is this action, that's an awesome start. Like, we all want you to take all the actions, but just, start where you could start. It's the trick question. Who can implement sustainability in business?
Everyone.
You can. Well, I guess the key thing I've been learning, I've just been going through a sustainability program this year, and something that was it's obvious when you say it out loud, but if it's not in your job title, it doesn't mean you can't do it. And there's a real strong level of informal authority that occurs within an organisation. You don't need to be a manager. You don't need to be the top, the owner. You can be anybody that's got passion and direction. And some of those people in your businesses who are the sort of the influential ones, the kind of ones that get people along to the barbecue or that get people raised up about, Pink Ribbon Day or whatever, those people are awesome to get behind sustainability initiatives because they have informal authority within your business and they're the ones that get the mahi happening. The other thing to note is sustainability is about systemic change. So fundamentally, we are asking our world to operate in an entirely different way to how it's been operating up till now. We've been operating in an extractive model. We extract from the environment, we create something, and then we dump it. And that model is not going to work for the future. So changes that you're trying to make are systemic. They're not always going to be straightforward, and the answer isn't always going to be obvious. So work with others, collaborate, and the building sector is a great example of that. Like collaboration, you've already got ways to collaborate within the sector, lean on them, talk to each other, figure things out. We're not going to get one business recycling their jib board and toe board. We need everyone doing it because it creates mass. You could get a backload on a truck going to Tauranga to take it to the save board. That's how we're going to solve these challenges, is working together. And the lovely thing about being in this space is people aren't precious in holding things closely. Like people want to partner and collaborate and look beyond the obvious people. So there's people in your community who are doing great work. Maybe they're at the food bank, maybe they're at the council, maybe they're at at Mainoki, like people that you might not normally talk to that could become really great partners in the work. And then how to implement it. These would be the tips that we would advise. So build the structure in your business so that it's not a little bolt-on thing. So you need to think about kind of the baseline of what you're doing every day. So in some businesses, you might have KPIs, or you might have a job description, or you might have the sort of the things that you kind of tick off at the end of the week. Did you do that? And if sustainability isn't part of that daily process, it's always going to be the little thing on the side that the person who does the Pink Ribbon Day kind of activates once a year. And that's not what we're heading for. Work with the willing. Don't worry about the people that are grumpy. Oh, there's no climate change. There's no emissions problem. Why should we do anything? It's all China's fault. Don't worry about those people. Like, you can spend a lot of time and energy and sort of depression on talking to those people. Work with people that are interested, that are excited, that like innovation, that are creative thinkers, and that is enough to create the groundswell. So I actually had a conversation with someone last night about this, and they were kind of saying, it's China's fault, blah, blah. And what difference can I make? And what I said is, I'm like, okay, Martin Luther King, one man. Gandhi, one man. I did only come up with men, which I was a bit annoyed about. And Nelson Mandela, one man. It is absolutely possible to do this.
Kate Shepherd.
Kate, I did think of her this morning. Kate Shepherd, one woman.
Yes.
Thank you. So don't think that you alone are not going to make a difference, because you do, and you will, and you particularly will if you look for others to collaborate with. And we are all out there waiting to work with you. Look for pilot projects. It's a really good way to try something, particularly if people are like, that'll never work. You could be like, well, it might work. And then also it may not work, but you would learn something that would make it work the next time. And it means low investment. You don't have to just be like, oh, we're changing the entire business. You can be like, oh, we're just going to try this one. Keep it upbeat and positive. There's lots of media around the sort of the fear of climate change and burning, the world's burning. That may be true, but it doesn't really inspire action. People tend to get a bit afraid, possum in the headlights. Well, this sounds really bad, and I'm going to go away and hide and read a nice light-hearted book for a while. So upbeat and positive creates more engagement. And then share your success. People are really afraid of sharing what they've done because they think they haven't done enough. They're kind of like, oh, there's this other person who's doing way more than me, and my stuff doesn't look that good. But the sharing enables others to learn from you, and it also builds momentum. So when you start sharing your story and then someone shares their stories, that people start thinking, oh, stuff's happening, and oh, that looks cool. And the Green Topal model is a great example of this. They started with 4 very small pilot projects in schools that were basically just small planting projects. And it grew and grew and grew. And look at what they're doing now. You know, and it hasn't actually taken that long. It came out of a thesis that Thea did at uni, basically, that she was kind of like, I reckon if we did this, it might work. And it has.